as you heard, and then we ran through to the Dark Saber, both times using the Phono 1, and now it was going through the Calon. The Calon is actually quite an interesting phono stage because it does certain things that allows what they have put into the lacquer and then thus press onto the vinyl to really come out. And one of the main important parts of it is the fact that it can amplify the input signal from the cartridge, minimum default level 10 dB. So even before we go into any IRIA or low frequency filter or anything, that signal is amplified by 10 dB. And the reason for it is, especially when you're looking at moving coil, the level is very, very low. And you're putting it through a filter network, IRIA, which is the reverse of what they do when they're recording onto the lacquer. So they're attenuating the bottom end, emphasizing the top end. And then when it's played back, it does the reverse to get a flat response. And thus the noise level at high frequency drops down with the level coming down. But the problem is that a lot of the signal is not just at high frequency. And unlike a mechanical filter, for example, if you had a sieve and you put some stones through it, so the smaller ones go through, the bigger ones don't go through. It has no impact on the little ones that gone through, and it has no impact on the big ones that have stayed up. On an electronic filter, although you're attenuating the top, the entire bandwidth goes through all the components that are in the filter network. So whatever adverse effect that filter has, it will impact almost the entire bandwidth. So if you start, it's almost like doing open heart surgery on somebody who is sick. So what we do is that we boost the signal up to get it a little bit healthier, so that once it goes through that filter network, it doesn't get quite as affected. And as a result, on the Calon, if you look at, for example, the distortion aspect of the, if you take 1K, 0 dB level, your second harmonic is 97 dB down. Your third harmonic, which is even worse, it is 104 dB down. It is almost undistorted. And you can choose zero input gain, but actually it isn't zero because we are amplifying by 10, the default is 10. Then you can go another 10, another 10, so 30 dB gain. So when we go to the moving coils, you will see that we're only using 30 dB gain on the input. And the output stage has got a nominal gain figure. It can be adjusted, but it stays, we normally keep it at the default level. We don't even need to do that. Another aspect of the Calon phono stage is that it has a low frequency filter. And this low frequency filter, I will demonstrate it, is quite important because no matter what you do with a piece of vinyl, you always have movement between the arm and the vinyl itself. That produces what we call subsonic noise. And this subsonic noise has nothing to do with the music itself. All it does, it reduces the headroom on your power amplifiers. It moves the bass driver in and out by a certain amount, depending on how much the arm is moving, but at a really low frequency, which has no impact on your music, no good impact on the music. And you can't even, in most situations, you can't even turn the volume up because you start hitting the end of the travel of the bass driver. And also, when the bass driver is moving backwards and forwards at subsonic, it moves outside of its linear position. So it's sort of doing the bass that it's doing, but it's going backwards and forwards like this. And if you stop that dead, then most people think that having a subsonic filter or low frequency filter, you lose bass. In fact, actually, you enhance your bass because it's not distorted. And you can hear it much better and it can go deep. So what we've done with this is that all the way down to approximately 17 hertz, which is the lowest note on an organ, is almost flat. Then from that point to going down to 10 hertz is 34 or 36 dB down, which means your bass driver, your amplifier will have no wastage whatsoever. And even if you've got a bookshelf, you can have a warped record and you can have a party with it, flatten it out. It needs to be done properly though. You can't just put a filter there because then it will have an impact, because it's sort of almost like this filter and your IRIA are meeting, and they should not be any adverse change in anything. Otherwise, your brain will pick it up. So it should be such that when you're playing it without, it's a little bit worse than when you're playing it with, irrespective of what, how low a frequency can be. I'm just going to play a little bit of a track. You all know the song is just played a little bit differently. And then what we will do is that we jump from this to the Mystic 2, which is a replacement of our original Mystic, which came out, what was it, 4 years ago? Something like that. And what has happened on that is there's nothing changed in the generator, cantilever, and diamond section. It's the way the body holds the generator, which it's borrowing from the X-Trax and the Ruby. So it's actually held by 4 almost like spike screws. And the main mass seen by the cantilever while the groove is driving it is actually the mass of the generator, which is only 2.5 grams. So it's like a very light, so it doesn't store any energy or anything. The spikes and the body become part of the head shell. So they're the supporting mass. It's almost like having a lightweight car, but the way it actually goes on the road, it actually holds the whole thing with aerodynamics properly. It's sort of an analogy to put it in perspective why it's a good idea when something is generating sound, the immediate mass not to be very high. We always try to keep the performance of any of the components we do, whether it's a record player, a cartridge, phono stage, etc. We don't check them just against each other. Our reference point is actually the source material that is used to cut the lacquer for the record. So we mimic the signal that went into the lathe. We play that through a system, whatever monitoring system we're using, and then we do the same thing with the record. So we play the same record through, sync it, so whatever source material cut that, for example, that track, will be the one that we try to use. And when we move to the Mystic 2, I hope you heard a bit of an improvement. But it's not like as if you're listening to a different performance. It's the resolution that just gets better. I always say it's almost like you start at the back of the auditorium. Every time you upgrade, you go a few rows forward. And you get to the point, by the time you get, for example, to the Ruby cartridge and the reference tone arm, etc., you actually hear a lot of the textures that are normally lost because the level is very low in the cut. And anything on a record player, anything on a cartridge that allows the stylus to sort of skate up and down on the groove will lose that, and it will increase more noise. Sometimes people say, how is it that even with the basic stuff that your record player is so quiet and is so dynamic? Well, you can't reduce noise and you can't increase dynamic range and detail unless your diamond is sitting in the groove perfectly. Any movement there, you lose that and you create noise. It's almost like a racing car. If the rubber on the tarmac is hitting it correctly and the wheels are rolling, you get less tire wear. The minute you start skidding, you have more tire wear. So for a record player to be quiet, to be dynamic, to have resolution, the only way to do it is making sure that the diamond is not jumping about in the groove. There's no other way of doing it. It has no intelligent part in there it can't play guitar. You know, it's just a diamond in the groove. And it is quite incredible, actually, that what we can get from this. In fact, one of the very nice, good friends of ours, Miles Schall, who does mastering and cutting and so on, he always says, and he's right, if somebody came to me today and we never had this and said, oh, we've got an idea for storing music, what we do is that we get a disc of aluminium, put some like cellulose on it, then we'll put on this lathe that we have designed where a cutter comes, and if he wants to produce a cymbal or a tambourine, it vibrates like 15,000 times a second and cuts this thing. And then we use that to put some metal on it, and then use that one to put some more metal on it, and the reverse of that to make a stamp head. Then we get a lump of vinyl, stamp it down, and then we go home. And then your job is to make something that picks it up. Forget it. You would just laugh today. If this didn't exist, you would laugh. But unfortunately, still the best medium for storing music. It's incredible that even if you're using, we have quite a few half-speed cut records that the source materials are high-resolution digital files. And if you play that high-resolution digital file and then play the record, if we're playing it on ours, normally people say, how come the record sounds better than the source material that cut it? And it's not actually illogical. I mean, if you had a tape machine, it would be really difficult to do that. But with a digital source, you can, because no matter what you do with a digital file or a CD or whatever you use, streaming anything, it needs to go through a digital to analog converter system. Otherwise, you'll be listening to something that sounds like a fax machine. You know, so it needs to be converted, and the conversion machinery always produces a huge amount of high frequency hash. In fact, if we make anything, it has to go through EMC for approval. And if it is a digital product, the A converter, CD player, something like that, you see it in megahertz and things, it's just going like this. And you need to be below a certain level to pass. But it's never flat. A phono state is nothing. It has no processing in there. There is no high frequency rubbish. So when you're listening to a digital file, no matter what you do in the background of it, there is some low digital noise in the spectrum. Now you send that signal to a lathe and tell it cut a lacquer. It is a natural filter file. It can't cut above 50, 60 kilohertz. And these things are in megahertz. So in fact, all of that is gone. So even if you cut a record with digital file, it will be the same. Now we wanted to show the filter. Yeah, we were talking about this low frequency filter. It's not permanently in. It's mainly to do, sometimes you need to check something and to see whether the filter is working or not working correctly. So if you can't switch it off, you can't do the test. Okay, can you see what's happening with the drivers? This is just happening between there. And it also produces like a wowing effect. And you won't be able to play this loud because it just hits the bottom end. Yeah, so if I put the filter on, the bass drive is staying where it is. Now, we were talking about cutting, and Miles always used to say, a good sounding record starts with a good sounding cut. Now, when you're cutting an album, obviously originally the whole concept of high fidelity and having a long playing system was that to get 20 minutes out of one side roughly. So it had to go at 33 and the cut happens and you get about 20 minutes, which is what normally people have a good focusing span. And at that point you want to turn over something, maybe get a drink or something like this. So that was the idea. But to get a high fidelity, obviously the noise had to be lower. The distortion has to be lower. So that's why they introduced IRAA, equalization, etc. And the lathes and things became slightly better in cutting. The amplifiers for them got better. But you're still fighting something that starts at, you know, about 300 mil diameter sort of thing, and then goes down to about half that, or just under half that. And because it's running at constant speed, as you're going towards the center, for a given period of time, you have less length of track. So if you're cutting something that has got a big build-up at the end, and it goes up to a crescendo, or everything smashes down, etc., and you're going towards the center, it needs to be limited. It will end up with some kind of a compression or limiting, or the levels go down, etc., so that you won't get any distortion, having lower land, which is actually the reason why a lot of time you may get, if the system isn't correct, you may get what they call inner side of the groove distortion. And they always attribute that to the fact that a pivoted arm has got a angular error. It's actually nothing to do with that. In fact, when you design a tone arm, you always have nearly twice the angular error at the beginning of the record than you got at the end of the record. So it's not the angular error that you get, that is the land goes down like this. It's almost like you're trying to maneuver through several cones, and you just suddenly halve the distance between the cones. It becomes a lot more difficult going through it. Slaloming through that is a much more difficult job than if you double the length, you know, which is what it is on the outside. So this has been done before a couple of times, but Miles was doing some experiment with he was doing some experiment with inside out cutting. So you start on the inside and you go to the outside. And one of the tracks that it would really lend itself to it was A Day in the Life, because it finishes up with a big, everybody's playing all the way high, and then right at the end, all these pianos come, you know, and it's so loud, and the echo goes on, and etc. So he did this cut inside out on an acetate, and when he actually brought it, it was an interesting time, because that day we had Nick Mason with his keyboard player, Don Becken, etc. We were listening to some stuff, and they did listen to this, and they thought, wow, never heard the end of Day in the Life with this much dynamic range. So that gave the idea to Nick to do echoes inside out. Obviously, this can't be 45 because echoes is 17 minutes or something long, so it's one side of a record. But he commissioned Miles to do a half-speed inside-out cut of the live performance they did at Frankfurt of Saucer Full of Secrets, his new band that they were playing. And unfortunately, the acetate I've got has got some noise on it, but I'll tell you something, the sound quality is just unbelievable. I've got a test pressing as well. I can play you the test pressing of the thing, or I can play you this if you prefer the acetate and put up with the noise. It came out on Record Store Day, by the way. So if you knew about it, you could have bought it. So it's actually this album. And I believe it may be out of print now, but I'm sure they will do more. Same as that happens with almost all the records that come out on Record Store Day. Everybody buys them, so 3, 4, 5,000 of them get sold, and then they have to repress, and it comes out in few months' time. So I'm sure it will come out. So acetate, acetate. Because a lot of the times people think, oh, echoes, doesn't it sort of go down at the end? No, it doesn't. Nearly 3/4 of the way, the whole havoc break loose with the drums, everything. And it's the first time you listen to it and you think, there's no compression here. It's just full out.